نقرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا عجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان أرضه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين واللعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن الناس من يشري نفسه ابتغاء مرضات الله والله رعوف بالعباد. آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Baqarah, ayah number 207 tells us, and among men is he who sells himself to seek the pleasure of Allah, and Allah is affectionate to the servants. In this blessed month of Rabi al Awwal, there are quite a few events in the life of Rasulullah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Among them, the most important being the very birth of Rasulullah, the best of beings that came on this face of this earth. However, there are many other important events that have taken place during this month, and which is also known as the month of Rasulullah. Amongst these events are the hijrat of Rasulullah from Makkah to Medina, which happened on the very first night of Rabi al Awwal, 13 years after Ba'asat. Another event is the laying of the foundation stone of the very first masjid of Islam, which is in Quba, and which was on the 12th of Rabi al Awwal, the day we just finished today. It is also a month in which Rasulullah married to Janab Khadija Kubra 15 years before Ba'asat, or 28 years before Hijrat. Of the other important events is the perishing of some most notorious enemies of the Ahlul-bayt, like Yazid ibn Muawiyah, la'anatullah alayh, and Umar ibn Sa'ad, and many others. When we look at the birth of Rasulullah, which we will celebrate in a couple of days, inshallah, we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wasalamu alayh describes the circumstances of the birth in a beautiful manner in a khutbah, the glimpse of which is that evils were raising heads, all matters were under disruption and in flames of wars, while the world was devoid of brightness and full of open deceitfulness. The minarets of guidance had disappeared and signs of destruction had appeared. This is an important khutbah, which is khutbah number 89 of the Nahjul Balagha, especially if we want to understand the doings and the happenings that are happening in the world today. We will see that instead of advancing, we are actually going towards and have reached that levels of the age of ignorance. What was happening then when Rasulullah was born is what is happening again, and this is in waiting for the Imam of our time, Imam al-Hujjah Jallallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. Hijrat is the a time when the Islamic calendar begins. All our dates are based on AH, which means after Hijrat, the day after the day Rasulullah migrated. The Christians begin their year with the birth of Nabi Isa, whilst the Jews have a couple of events with which they narrate their events and their years accordingly. The pre-Islamic Arabs always calculated their years based on a certain event of importance. For example, we are always told that Rasulullah was born in Amul Fil, the year of the elephants, based on the event of the elephants when Abraha had come with an army of elephants to destroy Kaaba. And it is the same year when they had perished. At the same time, it is the same year when Rasulullah was born in Makkah. However, as far as we are concerned, the very first year of migration, the Islamic Republic, or rather the Islamic government, was established in Medina upon the Hijrat, and therefore Rasulullah named that our calendar will start with that. In the period of the second Khalifa, there was a campaign actually to change this. However, because Amir al-Mu'mineen was not happy about it, they finally decided to abandon this change. It is important that we understand the event of Hijrat, because there are a couple of lessons that we can actually get from this. And let us therefore discuss this important event. Upon the death of Abu Talib, the Quraysh and the Arabs of Makkah joined hands towards increasing the hostilities towards Rasulullah and the Muslims in a multifold manner. Whilst on the other hand, the people of Medina, who were hearing all about the deen of Islam that Rasulullah had come with, were more attracted and were giving much more attention. 3 years before the Hijrat, a group of 6 Medinans came to Makkah for Hajj. These 6 people met Rasulullah, and in this conversation and dialogue, Rasulullah explained to them the principles of Islam, with which they immediately converted to Islam, and they went and became actual ambassadors of Muslims and Islam in Medina. Such was their zeal that there was no house left in the city of Medina by these 6 people that did not discuss Rasulullah and his mission of Islam. So in the 12th year after Ba'ath, that is 1 year before Hijrat, another group of 12 people came to Makkah for Hajj and met Rasulullah. It is at this time that Rasulullah not only invited them and converted them into Muslims, but made a pact with them, which is called the Pact of Aqaba, the first agreement of Aqaba. In this pact, they assured Rasulullah of a couple of things, amongst which they were aware from the Jewish teachings of Nabi Musa as well, that they shall not associate anyone with Allah, they shall not steal or commit adultery, they shall not kill their children, they shall not slander one another, and they shall not fail to perform good deeds. When these 12 people returned to Medina, their hearts were full of faith, and when they came, they became very active in propagating the teachings of Islam. Soon they wrote a letter to Rasulullah requesting him to send a missionary to Medina so that the missionary could explain what Islam really means and the teachings of Islam. Rasulullah, upon their request, sent Musayyab ibn Umair, who was very zealous and very prolific in his teachings. This led to the second agreement of Aqaba, when a group of 500 Medinites came for Hajj, in which 73 had already become Muslims, and these 73 signed the second pact of Aqaba, in which they not only offered to protect Rasulullah from the atrocities and the tortures of the Quraysh and the Arabs of Makkah, but also pledged to give up themselves, their own selves, as well as their wealth, and invited Rasulullah to migrate to Medina for security. Now, at this moment, we can understand one thing, that when the Orientalists are pouncing upon us and pouncing upon the world that Islam was spread through the sword, we would like to invite them to the events like Hijrat, the apex of Aqaba, and many, many events that happened thereafter. That it wasn't the sword. Rasulullah or Amir al-Mu'minin had not raised their sword at all until then. It was only the rationality, the reasoning, and the logical explanation of Islamic principles that brought people to the faith of Islam. It is not the sword that spread Islam. Yes, the Khulafa of Muslimin, whom the Muslims appointed, used Islam's name to further their own mulukiyat, as we say, the expansion of their own kingdoms and empires. It wasn't Islam. Islam only came with reasoning and logical explanation. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When we look at the life of Musayyab in Medina, before Rasulullah had arrived, there were hostilities against him as well in Medina, and there were groups of people who used to come with open swords to fight Musayyab, the missionary of Rasulullah. But every time they came, and whoever came to Musayyab, he would offer them that before you use your sword, please keep them down, let us sit and discuss. Then if you feel that you want to kill me, you will be free to do so. And there were so many occasions that Musayyab, instead of being hostile to them, converted them into becoming friends of Islam and friends of Rasulullah and becoming anxious to see Rasulullah. These very enemies. On the other hand, when we look at this, the people of Medina, when they were accepting Islam in droves, groups after groups were accepting Islam and becoming Muslims, the people of Makkah increased their tortures towards the Muslims who had converted in Makkah. So Rasulullah ordered them to one by one start moving and migrating to Yathrib, which was known as Yathrib. Then Medina became known as Madinatul Rasul later on. And he asked them to move without making noise or without making it too conspicuous for the kuffar to know. And when the agreement of Aqaba was signed, and when the Quraysh and the Arabs came to know that Muslims are migrating to Yathrib and that there is an agreement that Rasulullah has signed, it brought a lot of fear amongst them. And they saw that if they do not stop this, and if Rasulullah was to leave Makkah, they will not be able to contain him or his mission or his propagation of Islam, of La ilaha illallah. And therefore they had to get together and they had to do something about it to contain him and not allow him to go. And therefore the coming together of these tribes of Quraysh, the hostile tribes of Quraysh as well as the kuffar of Makkah, there was something called Darun Nadwa in Makkah. Darun Nadwa was a meeting place of the chiefs of all the tribes, in which whenever there was any important issue, they would make a joint decision of how to move forward. Darun Nadwa was called of how to stop Rasulullah from moving further. And in that Darun Nadwa, in that consultative assembly, as we call it, this crisis was presented. And in the opening of the meeting, a man introduced the proceedings thus, and he says, "We, the people of the Haram," they call themselves the people of the Haram, like we have today Khadimul Haramain. That time also people used to call the people of Haram. They were respected by all tribes, he says. However, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has sowed the seeds of discord and thus posed a great danger for us. Now we have lost all patience, thus we need to do something to contain this. During this debate, the 3 or 4 main proposals that came forward are worthy of note. One man stood up and said, what we need to do is nominate one person who should go and kill Rasulullah. And at the other hand, when the Banu Hashim come to take revenge, we will all be responsible of paying him the blood money. paying Banu Hashim the blood money. And a Najdi, a person from Najd, stood up and says, this proposal is not practical because Banu Hashim will neither spare the life of the killer nor will any form of blood money satisfy them for killing Muhammad. So this is not a practical situation. And he continued, whoever volunteers for such a job, he says, must understand and comprehend the consequences that will follow of doing it. So there were no volunteers, of course. The second proposal that came thereafter was that Rasulullah be captured and put in a prison like a hole in which he would be only sent food and water through a hole whereby he would survive and die in that hole. However, the same Najdi stood up and says this is even worse than the first one because Banu Hashim will wage wars to make sure that Muhammad is released and that they cannot touch him. So the third proposal that came is that we tie Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to a camel which is rogue and let him loose so that he would go fast and throw him away, and that is how he would kill him. And the same Najdi once again opposed this, saying, do you not know how attractive and fascinating the speech of Muhammad is? Will he not be able to tame the camel that he will sit on? So even this is not a practical. There was a very long moment of silence because there were no proposals that were coming forward, when finally this Najdi and Abu Jahl, according to some narrations, came with an idea which was unanimously adopted. And they said the only proper and easy way is that every tribe that is here sends one representative who is a killer, and they would get together and kill Rasulullah together so that no one tribe can be blamed. And there's 40 people were nominated from that Darun Najwa so that they can kill Rasulullah. However, as Allah has mentioned this case in Surah Anfal, verse 30, وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُوا بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُثْبِتُوكَ أَوْ يَقْتُلُوكَ أَوْ يُخْرِجُوكَ وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. And when those who disbelieved devised plans against you that they might confine you or slay you or drive you away, and they devised plans, and Allah devised and arranged His plan, and Allah is the best of planners. This is when this ayah was revealed. And Allah gave divine assistance for keeping Rasulullah not only alive but also migrate to safety. Because Allah's purpose was to save His message as well as His messenger. Ayatullah Jafar Subhani explains that whilst most of the Sunni and Shia Muhaddithin explain that this was a miraculous feat, however, if we look at the incident, everything that Rasulullah did was not miraculous but rather well planned on how he would undertake this, whilst divine assistance was there for his protection. And Allah willed to provide him safety through natural channels. So Rasulullah planned the whole thing. How when Jibreel came and informed Rasulullah of the plot of the Quraysh and the Kuffar, he planned his entire journey. He called upon his brother, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, and told him, would you sleep in my bed tonight and cover yourself with the green sheet which I use during sleep, because the enemies have conspired to kill me, and it is therefore necessary that I should migrate to Yathrib. Why Rasulullah asked Imam Ali alayhi salam to sleep on his bed and not accompany him? Being the warrior that he was, we must understand that until that time, Imam Ali alayhi salam had not drawn his sword. The sword of Ali was drawn after Hijrat, and the first time it was drawn was at Badr. Yes, he was a staunch protector of Rasulullah, whether it was Taif, whether it was Makkah, or whichever place Rasulullah went to. The simplest answer that Ayatollah Jafar Subhani gives in his whole biography of Rasulullah, he says that Ali was the first to believe in Rasulullah himself. And he whirled around from the day of his appointment to the prophetic mission just as a moth whirls around a candle. Amir al-Mu'mineen was whirling around Rasulullah like a moth which runs around the flame of the candle. The only question that Amir al-Mu'mineen asked Rasulullah at this time when he was told by Rasulullah to sleep on his bed was, "Will my sleeping keep you safe?" And Rasulullah assured him that the enemies would feel that he is still at home while he will leave in the middle of the night. Without any hesitation, Amir al-Mu'mineen jumped into the way it is said that he went to bed early on that night when he used to sleep very little in the night. He slept on the bed of Rasulullah, or rather we say Imamat was sleeping on the bed of Risalat. Amir al-Mu'mineen immediately offered to sacrifice his life for the safety of Rasulullah. He put the green mantle of Rasulullah and slept a peaceful sleep, such that he himself says that I have never slept like that in my life of this earth. And this was not only on that time. Ali was always willing to sacrifice everything for Rasulullah and the mission of Rasulullah. Not only was Ali like that, his brothers were like that, his father had taught them like that, his children from the time of Ali, from the progeny of Ali until the time of Al-Qaim al-Ali Muhammad Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, have all had this to sacrifice their lives and everything for Rasulullah and the mission of Rasulullah. So when the night was in the past midnight, and these people had already surrounded and besieged the house of Rasulullah, they wanted to attack Rasulullah in the middle of the night, at midnight, when Abu Lahab stood up and said, "No, you cannot enter this house in the middle of the night because there are women and children, the family of Banu Hashim in the house, and therefore they may be hurt during this that you are planning to do. So you will have to wait till the morning." And therefore they all waited for the morning. However, in the middle of the night, past midnight, when 3/4 of the night had passed, Rasulullah recited the verse, وَجَعَلْنَا مِن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَخْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ, the ayah of Surah Yasin. Mu'minin, this is an ayah that says, and we have made before them a barrier, and a barrier behind them. Then we have covered them over so that they do not see. Sometimes, on a lighter note, some of the mu'mineen use this when they are passing through customs, so that the custom officer may not see their luggage. But this is not what this ayat is for. This is for getting to security for the righteous. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And this, when Rasulullah recited this verse, and he left right under their nose, but they could not see him, nor hear him, nor notice him. And it is said that there is a hadith that says that Allah put them into a drowsy situation, that all of them fell asleep. And this is where the ayah's main concentrated thing that you must understand of Surah Anfal, where Allah says, وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. They can plot and plan whatever they want, and Allah has His plan, and Allah is the best of planners. So at the time of dawn, they entered the house of Rasulullah making a lot of noise. We can imagine 40 people with all open swords. entering a house early in the morning at the time of dawn, at the time of Fajr, making noise to go into the bedroom of Rasulullah. And when they reached there, Imam Ali alayhi salam just opened the mantle and stood up from that time, from the bed. So when they looked at him, they said, "What is the matter?" Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "What's the matter with you guys? How come you have entered the house of Rasulullah?" And they said, "Where is Muhammad? Where is he?" And Imam replied, "Did you hand him over to me for me to give it back to you? Did you give me Rasulullah as an amanat so that I return back to you? Anyway, he is not in the house at present." The faces of these 40 people who had come with open swords were now flushed with anger, and their throats were choking on this account that they had failed. So the first thing they did was they opposed and they started blaming Abu Lahab for stopping them for not attacking Rasulullah at night. So they began to fight amongst themselves. However, they concluded that it is too soon for Rasulullah to have crossed the borders of Makkah into Yathrib. And therefore he is either within Makkah or just outside Makkah, and we need to find him. At that time, Rasulullah, which was the first night, it was a dark night, first night of Rabi al Awwal. He went and left Makkah. Now Medina is north of Makkah. Rasulullah went south and went into the cave of Thawr, as we know, Ghar-e Thawr, where he and his companion Abu Bakr were together in that cave. They rested there for the night. The Quraysh and the Kuffar decided to block all the roads outside Makkah and post watchmen along the paths leading to Yathrib. They also procured the services of one particular person who knew how to look for footsteps and find out people where they were going and which direction they were going. And this particular man, who was known by the name of Abu Karz, was famous that he even knew the footsteps of Rasulullah. So when he was acquainted by this, he went along the footsteps and reached Ghar-e Thawr. And he deputed one person and says, "Maybe Muhammad is in this cave, so go and check for him." But when this man came, Allah had planned to protect Rasulullah. There was very heavy cobwebs made by the spiders there, such that even the wild birds had even laid eggs on these cobwebs. And he came back saying, "This is full of cobwebs and there is no way any person has entered here in one night, and that this is a very old cobwebs." And they left that place. They started looking for Rasulullah for 3 days and 3 nights. And in that time, the entire period of 3 nights, Rasulullah was in the same cave of Thawr. However, Amir al-Mu'mineen used to come to him every day and meet him and take instructions from Rasulullah. Amongst the instructions that Rasulullah gave him after the event of Ghar-e Thawr was, "You will return all the amanat of the people that I have. 2, you will bring the Fawatim, that is Fatima bint Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Fatima bint Asad, that is the mother of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Fatima bint Zubair, together with all the other members of the family, as well as the remaining Muslims who are in Makkah, to Medina. And arrange for camels for their ride," which Amir al-Mu'mineen did. After this, Amir al-Mu'mineen came and in open daylight made a public announcement that whoever has anything with Rasulullah should come and claim, and gave away all the amanat back after they identified their amanat. Whilst on the other hand, Abu Bakr, who was in the cave with Rasulullah, was always agitated and anxious, always fearing and crying and weeping, and Rasulullah used to calm him down by saying, "Don't worry, Allah is with us." There came a time that as they were traveling by the night after the 3rd day, Rasulullah and Abu Bakr at night, and they were resting in the day, a man by the name of Saraqah spotted them, and he was with a group of people, but he wanted the prize for getting Rasulullah on his own, because the prize the Quraysh had put on the head of Rasulullah was 100 camels. So he wanted all the 100 for himself. So he dissuaded them that is not Muhammad, that it is not them, it is somebody else, let us go back. They went back home, and he kept his camel back and rode a swift horse to go to the place where Rasulullah was. And Rasulullah, immediately when he saw Saraka, prayed to Allah that, Ya Allah, save us from the mischief of this man. And when Saraka mounted his horse again after having spotted and spoken to Rasulullah, the horse violently threw him off his back. And this is when he immediately realized that there is a divine hand in this. This horse that he has tamed for so long could not have thrown him like this. It was on the 12th of Rabi al Awwal when Rasulullah reached Quba, the first place, and this is where he camped in the place where it is known as Banu Amr, and that is where he camped, and he waited for Imam Ali and the other group to join him. Some of the early migrants to Medina had known that Rasulullah had migrated and were coming. They came up to Quba to tell him, let us go back to Medina very quickly because people are waiting for you. And upon his arrival, some insisted that we proceed straight to Medina, but Rasulullah refused, saying that he will wait for Ali to come. When it came to Amir al-Mu'mineen, who reached the same week that Rasulullah reached, after a couple of days, Amir al-Mu'mineen arrived at Quba when his feet were bleeding. He had walked the entire path and could not walk any further, so he was resting when Rasulullah was told that Ali's feet are bleeding. Rasulullah came running towards Ali, and when he saw the feet of Ali, he started weeping with tears in his eyes. The Ansar came to tell Rasulullah to come to Medina quickly because people are waiting. And when they were told, the people of Medina were told that Rasulullah has left Quba for Medina, they all came out of the city of Medina to welcome Rasulullah. And when they spotted Rasulullah arriving in Medina, they started singing poems in his praise. And the poem that we recite, Tala al-Badru alayna, is when it was first recited by the people of Medina welcoming Rasulullah, in which they say, the moon rose from Thaniyatul Wida. It is our duty to be thankful for this blessing till the day when every one person, even one person on the face of earth, prays to Allah and worships Him. O you, that is Rasulullah, who has been sent by Allah for our guidance, it is necessary for us to obey your orders. One of the lessons of this is that when the Imam of our time will reappear, it is this that he will be waiting for. Are we going to welcome him by saying our obedience to you is wajib? This is what we have to wait for. Will we become as anxious and excited as the people of Medina welcoming Rasulullah? However, the event of the hijrat of Rasulullah is incomplete if we do not speak about the self-sacrifice of Ali. Imam Ali simply jumped to save Rasulullah. And this was his mission, to save Islam and save Rasulullah. Not once, not twice, but in everything. One of the main events that we know is the judgment of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam always considered Islam as the baby of Rasulullah and wanted to protect it. When we look at the judgment of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we always acknowledge by subhanallah, by saying that when two mothers came and claimed the child to be theirs. Each one claimed that the child belonged to her. Now we know that there can be situations where there can be two fathers who can claim parenthood, but there can never be two mothers who give birth to one child. So when Imam Ali alayhi salam tried to convince them both, and none was budging from her position, Imam says, bring my sword, let me cut this baby into half, and I will give each one of you half, because you are not compromising. And one of the women immediately cried out and says, no, Ali, let the baby live, and you can give it to her. And Imam says, this is the truthful mother. When we look at Amir al-Mu'mineen's time, why did he keep quiet and not claim his right to Khilafat after Rasulullah? Is the same principle that Islam was a baby. Had he claimed his Khilafat and fought with those who had usurped his Khilafat, the baby would have been killed into two groups and none would have known what the real Islam is. And therefore, he accepted to give away his right to Khilafat so that the baby which was Islam should live. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq, to be amongst those who will welcome the Imam of our time the way the people of Medina welcomed the Rasulullah. Ya Allah, grant us the tawfiq to be amongst those who will help the Imam of our time. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. Rahmallahu man kara al-Fatiha.
By Faraj. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma kulli waliyaka al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. Salawatuka alayhi wa ala abai. في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله.